A millionaire tells his fiancée he was bankrupt to test her love. Her reaction shocked him. Welcome to Wise Stories. Please do remember to subscribe, like and share this video. William Harrington leaned against a fruit stall in a bustling Greek marketplace, taking in the colorful chaos around him. The air was rich with the scent of ripe figs and freshly baked bread, and the voices of locals haggling over prices blended into a cheerful melody. William adjusted the sunglasses resting on his sharp nose and glanced at his watch. Even on vacation, he couldn't entirely switch off his New York businessman mode. Just as he was about to move on, something caught his eye. A woman stood a few feet away, studying a small handcrafted vase. Her sun-kissed hair was pulled into a loose braid, and her simple summer dress swayed in the warm Mediterranean breeze. She was unpretentious, unlike the people William was used to in his world of high society. There was something captivating about how she seemed utterly absorbed in her surroundings, as if this moment was the most important thing in her life. William stepped closer, curious. The woman turned to the vendor, holding up the vase. "How much is this?" she asked in a soft voice. The vendor grinned and launched into rapid Greek. The woman's brows furrowed as she tried to follow his words. €15, William said smoothly, stepping in beside her. Startled, she turned to him, her green eyes meeting his. "Oh, thank you. I was completely lost there for a second," she said with a laugh. "It's easy to get overwhelmed," William replied, his lips curving into a polite smile. "Especially when you don't speak the language. Do you want me to help?" "That would be great," she admitted, offering him a grateful smile. "I'm Anne, by the way. Anne Carter." "William Harrington," he said, extending his hand. As they shook hands, he couldn't help but notice how firm yet gentle her grip was. And glanced back at the vase. "I was thinking of getting this for my mom. She loves things like this, but I don't want to overpay." William chuckled. "In a place like this, everything is negotiable. Let me try." A few minutes later, William handed the vendor €10 and passed the vase to Anne. "There. A fair price." Anne's eyes lit up as she accepted the vase. "Thank you so much. You didn't have to do that." William shrugged, his smile growing. "It's part of the experience. Besides, it gave me an excuse to talk to you." And blushed slightly but laughed. "Well, I'm glad you did. Are you here on vacation?" "Yes, a much-needed break from the chaos back home." "And you?" "I'm here on vacation, too," she said. "It's my first time in Greece. I've been saving for this trip for years." William raised an eyebrow. "And how do you like it so far?" "It's magical," Anne said, glancing around the marketplace. "Everything feels so alive, the colors, the smells, the people. I love it." William found himself drawn to her enthusiasm. "I agree. It's a refreshing change from the usual pace of life." And tilted her head. "Where are you from, William?" "New York," he replied. "And you?" "Denver," she said with a smile. "Quite different from New York, I imagine." "Quite different," William agreed, his tone light. "I'd love to hear more about it over a coffee. There's a little cafe just down the street that serves the best baklava." And hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Why not? Lead the way." The cafe was tucked away from the noise of the marketplace, with tables shaded by olive trees. William ordered coffee for both of them and a plate of baklava to share. "So, Anne, what do you do in Denver?" William asked as the waiter left. "I'm a teacher," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "I work with third graders. They're a handful, but I love it." William smiled. "That sounds rewarding. I imagine it takes a lot of patience." "It does," Anne admitted, laughing. "But it's worth it." "What about you? What do you do in New York?" "I run a business," William said vaguely. He wasn't sure why, but he didn't feel like mentioning his wealth just yet. "It keeps me busy, but I try to make time for things like this." and leaned back in her chair, studying him. You seem more relaxed than most businesspeople I've met. What brings you to Greece? I needed a change of scenery, William said honestly. And a reminder that life isn't just about work. Anne nodded, her expression thoughtful. I get that. Life moves so fast sometimes, it's easy to forget to slow down and enjoy the little things. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, covering everything from childhood memories to their favorite books. William found himself laughing more than he had in months. Anne's wit and warmth were a stark contrast to the polished but often shallow people he usually encountered. Over the next few days, William and Anne continued to spend time together. He took her to hidden beaches and local tavernas, showing her parts of Greece most tourists never saw. One evening, they sat on a hill overlooking the sea, the stars twinkling above them. Anne wrapped a light shawl around her shoulders as the breeze picked up. This has been the best trip of my life, Anne said, gazing at the horizon. I'll never forget it. William turned to her, his expression serious. Neither will I. Anne looked at him, surprised by the depth in his voice. Do you always speak like that? She teased, trying to lighten the mood. William chuckled. Only when I mean it. They fell into a comfortable silence, the sound of the waves below filling the space between them. Do you think we'll ever see each other again? Anne asked quietly. William hesitated, then reached for her hand. I hope so. But if not, I'm glad we met. You've reminded me of what's important in life. Anne smiled, her fingers tightening around his. I feel the same way. On their last day together, William and Anne stood by the airport gate, their suitcases by their sides. I guess this is goodbye, Anne said, trying to keep her voice steady. Only for now, William replied. I'll call you. We'll make this work. Anne nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I'll hold you to that. As they hugged, William realized he didn't want to let her go. But life was calling them back to their separate worlds, and all they could do was hope that their connection would survive the distance. Anne walked away first, clutching the small vase she had bought on their first day together. William watched her go, a strange ache settling in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt like he had found something real. And he wasn't ready to let it slip away. The hum of New York City was ever present as William Harrington leaned back in his leather office chair, staring at his phone. It was nearly midnight, but sleep was the furthest thing from his mind. His schedule had been relentless all day, back-to-back meetings, negotiations, and phone calls. Yet, here he was, waiting for the familiar sound of Anne's voice. His phone buzzed, and a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. It was Anne. Hey, she said, her voice warm but tinged with exhaustion. Hi, William replied, leaning forward, his tone softening. How was your day? Oh, you know, Anne said with a light laugh. A classroom full of 8-year-olds and a broken copy machine. But we managed. How about you? Chaos, as usual, William admitted, running a hand through his hair. I had to deal with 3 clients who couldn't agree on anything. It felt like babysitting billionaires. Anne chuckled. I guess we're both in the business of keeping people in line. I'd trade places with you in a heartbeat, William said sincerely. Your world sounds simpler. Anne paused, then replied, it is simpler, but it's not easy. Some days, I come home completely drained. Teaching isn't glamorous, but I love it. I admire that about you, William said, his voice carrying a note of admiration. You found something you love and made it your life. They talked for hours, as they often did. Their conversations were the bridge between their vastly different worlds. Yet, as much as they cherished these moments, the distance was starting to weigh on both of them. In Denver, Anne sat on the small couch in her apartment, a pile of student essays beside her. She stared at the picture of William on her phone, a candid shot of him laughing during their time in Greece. He looked so out of place in her modest world, surrounded by textbooks and thrift store furniture. Her sister, Emily, walked in, carrying a steaming cup of tea. Still thinking about him? and sighed, leaning back. I just don't know if this will work, Em. He's in New York, living this crazy, glamorous life, and I'm here, grading papers. Emily sat beside her. Do you love him? And hesitated before nodding. I do. But sometimes, I feel like I don't belong in his world. It's all so big. Maybe you don't need to belong to his world, Emily suggested. Maybe he needs someone like you to remind him what's real. Meanwhile, in New York, William was grappling with his own doubts. During a meeting at an upscale restaurant, his friend Michael leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of wine. So, this and, Michael said, smirking. The teacher from Denver. She's the one you've been talking about nonstop? William nodded, a rare smile softening his usually serious expression. She's incredible, Michael. She's nothing like the people we know. She's real. Michael raised an eyebrow. Real? Sounds like she's from a different planet. That's what I like about her, William said firmly. She's grounded. She sees life differently. Michael chuckled, but there was a sharpness to his tone. Well, I hope she's ready for your world. Because, let's face it, Will, your life isn't exactly ordinary. William didn't reply immediately. Michael's words lingered in his mind. Wasn't ready for the pressures, the constant scrutiny, and the demands of his lifestyle? And visited New York a month later, excited yet nervous. William greeted her at the airport, his smile warm as he wrapped her in a hug. I missed you, he said softly, holding her close. I missed you, too, Anne replied, her voice muffled against his chest. They spent the weekend exploring the city. William took her to his favorite spots, Central Park, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and a quiet cafe hidden in the heart of Manhattan. Anne loved seeing the city through his eyes, but she couldn't help feeling like an outsider. On their last night together, William hosted a small dinner party at his penthouse. Anne wore a simple dress, feeling out of place among the elegantly dressed guests. She stayed close to William, but the conversations around her felt distant: deals, investments, and high society gossip. Michael, who had been invited, noticed Anne's discomfort. He approached her with a glass of champagne, his charm unmistakable. So, you're the famous Anne, he said smoothly, offering her the drink. Anne smiled politely. I guess that makes you Michael. He laughed. Guilty. William talks about you a lot. You must be something special to have caught his attention. And shifted uncomfortably. I'm just me. Michael leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. You know, it's not easy being with someone like William. His world can be overwhelming. Are you sure you're ready for it? And frowned, caught off guard by the question. I love him. That's what matters, right? Michael smirked, his tone turning slightly condescending. Of course. But love doesn't always survive reality. Just something to think about. Anne's confidence wavered. Was Michael right? Could she truly handle the challenges that came with being part of William's life? Later that evening, as the guests began to leave, William noticed Anne sitting alone by the window, staring out at the city lights. Hey, he said gently, taking a seat beside her. You okay? Anne forced a smile. Yeah, just taking it all in. William studied her for a moment. You don't have to pretend, Anne. I can tell something's bothering you. She hesitated, then sighed. It's just, your world is so different from mine, Will. Sometimes, I feel like I don't fit. William reached for her hand. Anne, I don't care about any of this. The only thing that matters to me is you. But how can I be part of your life if I don't understand it? Anne asked, her voice breaking. You don't have to understand it, William said firmly. You just have to be yourself. That's what I fell in love with. Anne nodded, her heart aching with both love and uncertainty. She wanted to believe him, but the doubts Michael had planted refused to go away. Back in Denver, Anne replayed the weekend in her mind. She wanted to talk to William about how she was feeling, but she didn't want to burden him. Meanwhile, William sat in his office, staring at a photo of Anne on his desk. He felt the distance between them more than ever, and Michael's words echoed in his mind. Am I pulling her into something she's not ready for? He wondered aloud. The cracks in their relationship were growing, but their love remained the thread holding them together. Both William and Anne knew they had to confront their doubts before they became too big to ignore. The question was, could their love withstand the pressure of their two very different worlds? The city sparkled beneath the twilight sky as William and Anne stepped out onto the rooftop of one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. Strings of soft lights were draped overhead, casting a warm glow over the elegant setup. The tables were arranged along the edge of the rooftop, offering breathtaking views of the Manhattan skyline. The atmosphere felt magical, like something out of a dream. This is incredible, Anne said, her voice full of awe. She looked around, taking in the glittering buildings and the gentle hum of the city below. William smiled, watching her face light up. I thought you'd like it, he said softly. A waiter led them to a private table set with crisp white linens, a vase of red roses, and flickering candles. William pulled out Anne's chair, and she sat down, still marveling at the view. Will, you didn't have to go to all this trouble, Anne said, her cheeks flushing. It's not trouble, William replied, sitting across from her. You deserve moments like this. Dinner was a blend of laughter and heartfelt conversation. They shared stories, dreams, and memories of Greece, their connection deepening with each word. But as the dessert plates were cleared, Anne noticed William seemed quieter, almost nervous. Is everything okay? She asked, leaning forward. William hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. There's something I've been wanting to ask you, he said, his voice steady despite the rapid beat of his heart. Anne tilted her head, her brow furrowing in curiosity. William stood and walked around the table, kneeling beside her. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. The light caught the stone, making it shimmer brilliantly. Anne, he began, looking into her eyes, you've changed my life in ways I didn't think were possible. You've reminded me of what truly matters, love, honesty, and the beauty of simplicity. I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me? Anne's hands flew to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. For a moment, she was too overwhelmed to speak. Then, with a trembling voice, she whispered, yes. Of course, yes. William slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. The rooftop erupted into quiet applause from the nearby tables, but in that moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. A few days later, William sat alone in his study, staring out at the city through the massive glass windows. Despite Anne's heartfelt yes, a gnawing insecurity had taken root in his mind. His wealth had always been a part of his identity, and though he trusted Anne, a small voice in his head wondered, would she still love me if I lost it all? Unable to shake the doubt, William made a decision. That evening, as Anne curled up on the couch in his penthouse, he joined her, his expression unusually serious. Anne, he began, his tone heavy. Anne looked up, concerned. What is it? I need to tell you something, William said, running a hand through his hair. I haven't been completely honest with you. Anne sat up straighter, her heart skipping a beat. What do you mean? William took a deep breath, as if summoning the courage to say the words. I've lost everything. The business collapsed, and I'm bankrupt. I have nothing left. Anne stared at him, her mind reeling. What? How? When did this happen? It's been building for months, William lied, his voice low. I didn't want to burden you, but now that we're engaged, you deserve to know the truth. Anne was silent for a moment, processing what he had said. Then, to William's surprise, she reached out and took his hand. William, she said firmly, her eyes searching his. Do you think I said yes to your proposal because of your money? Because if you do, you don't know me at all. William looked at her, his heart aching with both love and guilt. I don't care about your wealth, and continued, her voice unwavering. I love you. I fell in love with the man who helped me haggle for a vase in Greece, who listens when I talk about my dreams, and who makes me laugh when I feel like crying. None of that has anything to do with money. William swallowed hard, unable to speak. Anne's words hit him like a wave, washing away his doubts. I'm not going anywhere, Anne said softly, squeezing his hand. We'll get through this together. Unbeknownst to William, Michael had been keeping a close eye on the situation. He visited William's penthouse one afternoon under the pretense of congratulating the couple. While William was out of the room, Michael seized the opportunity to speak with Anne. And, Michael said smoothly, his tone deceptively kind, I couldn't help but hear about William's situation. It's a tough break, isn't it? Anne nodded cautiously. It is, but we'll figure it out. Michael leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You're a strong woman, and I admire that. But are you sure William's being entirely truthful with you? Anne frowned, taken aback. What do you mean? Michael shrugged, feigning reluctance. I just mean that William can be complicated. Sometimes he keeps things from the people closest to him. You deserve honesty, Anne. That's all I'm saying. Anne felt a knot form in her stomach. Why would he lie to me? Michael smiled faintly. I'm not saying he is. But if I were in your shoes, I'd ask myself some hard questions. You deserve to know the whole truth, don't you? That evening, Anne couldn't shake Michael's words. She sat on the bed, staring at the engagement ring on her finger. Doubt began to creep in, but her love for William kept her grounded. When William joined her, he noticed her distant expression. Anne? What's wrong? She hesitated, then shook her head. It's nothing. Just tired. William didn't press, though her response left him uneasy. The seeds of doubt planted by Michael threatened to grow, but Anne clung to her love for William. She resolved to confront him directly if the doubts became too much. For now, she chose to trust the man who had knelt before her on that rooftop and promised her forever. Little did she know, the truth of William's test would soon come to light, and their love would be tested like never before. Anne was alone in her Denver apartment, her mind spinning with Michael's words. The idea that William had lied to her about being bankrupt felt like a punch to the gut. She replayed their conversations in her head, the pain in his voice when he'd confessed, her own reassurances that his money didn't matter. If it wasn't true, then why had he told her otherwise? Her phone buzzed on the table, and she saw William's name light up the screen. For the first time, she hesitated before answering. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the call. Hey, Anne, William's familiar voice said warmly. Hi, Anne replied, her tone distant. William immediately sensed something was wrong. Is everything okay? Anne's stomach churned. She wanted to yell, to demand answers, but instead, she said quietly, we need to talk. In person. 2 days later, Anne arrived in New York. William greeted her at the airport with his usual smile, but her serious expression made it falter. Anne, what's going on? He asked as they sat in his car. She took a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. William, I've been hearing things about you. About the bankruptcy. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. What have you heard? Michael told me that you lied, and said bluntly. That you're not actually bankrupt. William's jaw tensed. He pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her. Anne, I need to explain. She crossed her arms, her voice trembling. Please do, because right now, I don't know what to believe. William took a moment, gathering his thoughts. I did lie, he admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. But it wasn't because I wanted to hurt you. It was because I needed to know something. Anne's eyes widened. What could you possibly need to know that would justify lying to me? William looked at her, his expression vulnerable. I needed to know if you loved me for me, not for my money. Anne blinked, stunned. You thought I cared about your money? After everything we've been through? I didn't want to believe it, William said quickly. But I've seen what money does to people, and I've been hurt before. I didn't want to lose you, but I also couldn't live with the fear that maybe it wasn't real. And shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. Do you know how much it hurt to see you in pain and to feel powerless to help you? I stood by you because I love you, William. Because I thought you needed me. And the whole time, it was just a test. I know I was wrong, William said, his voice breaking. I let my insecurities get the best of me. I should have trusted you. I'm so sorry, Anne. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Anne wiped a tear from her cheek, her emotions a storm of anger, sadness, and love. Do you know how hard it is to hear this, William? To know that you didn't trust me? I do, William said, reaching for her hand. And I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm asking for it anyway, because I love you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I hate that I jeopardized that. And stared at him, her heart aching. She could see the regret in his eyes, the raw vulnerability in his voice. Despite everything, she loved him. She wanted to be angry, but she also knew that his actions, as misguided as they were, had come from a place of fear. I need time, she said finally. I'm not saying I'm walking away, but I need to process this. William nodded, his relief tinged with sadness. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting. Back at her apartment in Denver, Anne reflected on everything. She thought about William's kindness, his humor, and the way he had made her feel so cherished. But she also couldn't ignore the sting of his lie. After days of reflection, she called him. William, she said when he answered, I've been thinking a lot. What you did hurt me, but I also know it came from a place of fear. I wish you had trusted me, but I can see that you're truly sorry. I am, William said earnestly. I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if I have to. I don't need proof, Anne said softly. I just need honesty. No more tests, no more lies. If we're going to build a life together, it has to be on a foundation of trust. You have my word, William said, his voice steady. No more lies. Just us. Meanwhile, Michael realized his plan had failed. Anne had seen through his manipulations, and William had won back her trust. Bitter and defeated, Michael quietly distanced himself from their lives, retreating into the shadows. Months later, Anne and William stood hand in hand on a quiet beach, the waves gently lapping at their feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Their wedding had been a modest but beautiful celebration, held in Anne's hometown. Surrounded by close friends and family, they had exchanged vows that spoke of love, trust, and resilience. I never thought I'd end up here, William said, gazing at Anne. Neither did I, Anne replied, smiling. But I'm glad we did. William squeezed her hand. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Anne leaned her head against his shoulder. Thank you for being worth it. As they walked along the shoreline, their laughter mingled with the sound of the waves. They knew life wouldn't always be easy, but they also knew that together, they could face anything. Their love had been tested, and it had emerged stronger than ever.